Thank you so much for watching Landumc Goes There. Please subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification button. In 1971, we got to experience a great road trip plot film that was directed by Monte Hellman. That movie was Two-Lane Blacktop. The production features a really strange cast: James Taylor, Dennis Wilson, and Warren Oates, and first-time actress Lori Bird. Now, with that being said, we might back up just a little bit and realize that James Taylor, who is a singer, had never acted before or since this movie. And also Dennis Wilson was in the same boat. Out of the entire cast, Warren Oates is the only one that had a resume in the acting field. The sparse plot of the film concerns two unnamed street racers that have a 1955 Chevy 150. These racers are played by Taylor and Wilson. They get challenged to a cross-country race from New Mexico to Washington, D.C. by a real mysterious stranger who has a Pontiac GTO. This stranger is played by Warren Oates. Along their way, the racers pick up a young female hitchhiker played by Lori Bird. And later on, she goes on to be in brief romances with all three of the men. This film is without a doubt a cult classic. It's remembered for its real minimalistic style and presentation. This film basically breaks all the rules of the studio system. Its ending is something that Hollywood never did. It just stopped. The director, Monte Hellman, said he was inspired by a similar moment from the 1966 film Persona. By the time that he had completed editing Two-Lane Blacktop, what started out as a pretty typical American road movie about two guys in a hot rod had changed drastically. Given the movie's plot, which is loosely based on a street-level view of the hot rod culture, we are compelled to pay attention to the lead actors in the movie. The driver is a hardcore jerk who retreats from the spotlight any chance he can. Then the mechanic is goofy and somewhat pedestrian, probably the kind of guy that sits around and works in his crummy garage and then tools around with a sports car on the weekend. And then GTO, played by Warren Oates, is more sympathetic. We notice in a later scene in the film, he tells the girl that his time is running out and that he needs to find some sort of permanence in his life. He states that if he's not grounded pretty soon, he's going to go into orbit. The project actually originated with producer Michael Laughlin, who had a two-picture deal with CBS Cinema Center Films. He convinced the production company to pony up $100,000 to pay Will Corey for his original story about two men, one of them that was white and one of them that was black, who end up driving across the country, followed by a young girl. All of this was inspired by his own 1968 cross-country journey. After returning from Italy, after a film project had fallen through, the director Hellman was introduced to the producer Laughlin. He showed Hellman two different projects that he thought he might be interested in. One of these was this film. Hellman was asked to direct it, but after reading Corey's story, he found it interesting, but not fully realized. He agreed to make the movie under one condition: that he was allowed to hire a screenwriter to rewrite this script, to which Laughlin agreed. There was an underground writer named Rudolph Wurlitzer, who one of Hellman's friends had recommended for the project. After doing a little bit of research on the guy, Hellman decided to team up with him to develop the script. The two agreed to keep the basic idea of the cross-country race, as well as the characters of the driver, the mechanic, and the girl. But the screenwriter invented the character of GTO, and the rest of the supporting cast. Location scouting began in February of 1970, and then they went through a series of bumps in the road where the project was canceled, and it became shopped around to several other Hollywood studios that liked it, but they wanted to have a say in the casting. Eventually, Universal Pictures gave the director Hellman $850,000 to make the movie, and also gave him control of the final cut of the film. It's said that Hellman saw James Taylor's picture on a billboard on the Sunset Strip. He then called the musician up and asked him to come in for a screen test. Principal photography was scheduled to start, but the role of the mechanic was still not cast. A friend of the casting director suggested musician Dennis Wilson. He was the last actor that was cast by the director, and he did that because he felt that the musician had lived that role, that he had really grown up around cars. On August 13th, 1970, they started principal photography in Los Angeles, and this lasted for 8 weeks with a crew of 30 that traveled through the Southwest towards Memphis, Tennessee. They had 3 matching Chevrolets to use in the film, along with 2 matching GTOs. Now, if you'll look on YouTube, there's a really interesting interview between James Taylor and Monte Hellman that I want to say was conducted in 2007. They really get into the nitty-gritty of this project, and also the fact that at that time, James Taylor had never seen the finished product at all. He really didn't want to see himself on screen. At that point in his life, he was fairly troubled with some serious substance abuse problems. But one of the things that really sticks out in this interview is that one of the final scenes that they shot in the Chevy almost turned into a disaster, possibly killing 3 people, including Taylor himself. The Chevy was in reverse gear as the engine was revved up to a high RPM, and they told Taylor to dump the clutch. When he did, the drive shaft came apart, went busting through the floor, barely missing Taylor and another cameraman that was in the back seat, along with the director who was really close to the action. They both really felt like they had dodged a bullet, as nobody ended up getting hurt. Go back and watch this really fun film. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.